So I'm going to start out by asking you some very general questions about how you first developed a feminist identity.
Ah, interesting. Me personally?
Yes.
Well, I think I would link that to, you see, I'm originally from England, and I was in Belfast in Northern Ireland, and then I emigrated to Canada, and just around the time when I was doing that, the books were coming out, like Germaine Greer's book, The Female Eunuch, and those kinds of books, and it was just capturing the interest of a lot of my contemporaries, and then when I went to Queen's, Kingston in Canada, then there were lots of groups, there was a group putting together a women's centre there, and it just seemed to make sense. And then in psychology, the group that I was kind of part of, in terms of my supervisor and everything, we were all interested in the social psychology of gender. So we just simply brought our kind of extracurricular interest to our work in psychology. So it was a very interesting time, actually, in order to be able to do that, to bring the two things together.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. But before that, when you say extracurricular activities, what kind of involvement, if any, did you have in the feminist movement? What kinds of things were you reading? You mentioned Germaine Greer.
Yeah, I mean, there were what were called then CR groups, consciousness raising groups, and basically it was just groups of women meeting, and there would maybe be something you would look at. I know there was a sort of one that was popular in those days. It was a kind of feminist analysis of housework. Women were just beginning to kind of question, all of these assumptions about what women did or should do, and we were at a university, so in some ways it was much easier already for us to begin, this kind of questioning. So it was happening both in sort of our lives and in the sort of academic material. I mean, it was a period when, I don't know if you've heard of Inga Broverman, the Broverman study, and Sandra Bam's work on androgyny. I mean, now it just seems like old hat, but at the time, when this was just being published, and I mean, I can remember going to hear Sandra Bam speak at UBC, I forget why I was there, and I mean, it was in a huge auditorium, and it was absolutely packed. It was just like, this was so different than the way people had been thinking.
Was there an active feminist movement on campus as well?
Oh yeah. I mean, the Women's Centre it wasn't just students, but there were people from Kingston involved, in the city. But it was really inspired by students. For instance, the sign for the centre, that we had outside on the door, saying, was provided by the Dean of Women from Queen's. And I have a photograph of her, the Dean of Women, standing outside the Women's Centre, with some of the women who had been very, very active in getting the centre going. And, as I think about it now, many of them were psychology graduate students. So, yeah, so it was, and we wrote letters to the local newspaper, and I know we were interested in health, women's access to woman-friendly health services, and we would put on talks around things like violence against women. I remember having somebody come from the local police And she started out by asking how many, she couldn't understand why we were so interested in this topic, violence against women. And she said, how many women in this group have experienced some kind of assault? And virtually every woman in the room put their hand up.
Yeah.
And she was just kind of, she really didn't appreciate the extent of the issue.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of conscious phrasing and stuff like that.